First is obviously today is Dashera. I want to wish everyone. And on that note, from you, Rajiv ji, I would want to know if we should feel happy. This is our festival. So while it looks like this is a long drawn fight, this is a very uneven fight. Like 200 years of their ecosystem versus what we are just trying to. We have just woken up actually. As you have told that we need to wake up, and some of us are waking up. So at some point of time, it looks like where are we going? Is it even a fight where we can survive? It's so uneven. So would you, on the auspicious occasion of Vijayadashmi, also hint at some of the positives, maybe some of the sources from where we should derive this energy, we should derive this, this confidence that while this battle might look completely uneven, it's where we need to be there and we can win.
This is a very good point, Rahul, that you raised. Thank you for a good framing of the whole issue. Vijayadashmi is a very good occasion to remember that we have to fight the good fight. It doesn't just happen. You see, the part of the problem is that our people became very passive. They became introverted. It is good. We have the Adhyatma. I practice, my whole practice is inward for many, many decades. And so I understand that, and that's the beauty of our tradition. But our tradition was never kind of abandoning the external responsibility. That is the message of Ramayana. You fight the enemy. In fact, Avatar comes to teach an example that you have to fight the enemy. And that's the moral of the whole Mahabharata. You have to fight the enemy. So this is not just we'll give out mithais and distribute good things, and with love we'll win over people. Because even the Avatar cannot win over the enemies. Either in Ramayana or Mahabharata has to give them a good physical fight also. So I think the message of the Itihas and the Vijayadashmi is that leaders have to lead from the front. So one of the most important things is I would like our leaders who are the heads of the senior people in the RSS not leave it to junior people. They have to come in front and be seen on media. They have to go be facing the opponents in panel discussions. They have to be on CNN or wherever the other people are. We have to get in there. You see, the ability for me is limited compared to the ability of an official institutional head, because if I go to CNN, they'll say, okay, you are one man. We can position you as an expert in your own academic opinion. That's okay. We'll do that. But the head of a big institution has got so much clout. They will definitely give you space. But our people are not using that. Neither are the Ministry of External Affairs. They have an Indian Council of Cultural Relations, which is part of MEA. Their job is cultural relations. They're setting up academic chairs. They have one in Rutgers University, by the way. That was set up by the Ministry of External Affairs. But when Rutgers University started doing all this dismantling Hindutva, those people who are occupying the India chair, funded by the Indian government, nowhere to be found. And many of the chairs set up in Harvard by our own billionaires, by Piramal, by Ambani, by Mahindra, those chairs were supporting the other side, attacking us. I'm repeating, academic chairs and centers funded $20 million, $50 million each by Mahindra, by Piramal, by Ambani, and many others at places, the highest Ivy League places, actually using that platform to fight against us, supporting all this attack on Hinduism. So I would say one of the first things we have to do is call this nonsense on happening from our top leaders. We have to say, listen, you guys have to either support us or don't pretend that you are for us. Because in India, they're all they're all very patriotic, nationalistic, and so on, and they are rewarded and awarded and so forth. But outside India, look what they're doing. So I'm actually saying that if a few leaders could be flipped to our side, if you could, for instance, convince Anand Mahindra to have a discussion with me, maybe you should moderate it. And we can have a discussion where I will bring out what his funded institutions overseas are doing against us. Let him respond. Let him at least become aware of it. Because right now there is a brick wall. It's very difficult to penetrate to the top industrialist who's giving this money. And all his people are spreading poison against us in various places. So so I would say, if you want very high leverage action, Of course, at the mass level, everybody should keep doing. We are getting more and more momentum thanks to these kind of initiatives. Your work is very important. I read your work, by the way. Your work is
Thank
very
you.
important. J.K. Jhavar's work is very important. But I think a few leaders at the top could make a very big difference for us.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the importance of leadership cannot be, stated enough. And Hindu community, in a way, is facing a leadership crisis. I mean, and we also have a confusion where, perhaps we also have confused between political leadership and the community leadership. And we perhaps we don't know whom to look at and who can really solve this issue. But anyway,
So
as you rightly said,
Rahul,
it's
so Rahul,
ev-
one thing.
yeah,
Sorry for interrupting, but one thing what you said exactly right. I want to clarify further. Our tradition was that the leader fights from the front.
right.
It is not the leader in the VIP room telling all the junior guys, हाँ जाके लड़ो, बहुत अच्छा काम है, आप लड़ो जाके,
Mm,
and I will
mm,
be staying out of trouble. I don't want to
mm,
take controversy. Okay, the
mm.
leader is in the front elephant. In the war, he
True.
was in the
Always.
elephant right in the front, and that is what our leadership has to do today. They have to be the ones, the face
Right.
of the movement has to be the top leaders. I mean, they are getting
Right.
all the resources they have at their disposal. They're getting so much celebrity status. They are. It's not just ribbon cutting and getting awards. They have to stand up in front. And I'm sorry, our leaders are not doing that.
True. 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 That's obviously an angst many people share, and these days, many are very much vocal about it. While we wait that that we can convince our leaders or make them see, this huge challenge. I would like maybe your ideas on a couple of other things that what we as in very in our own limited capacity what we can do. Obviously, you have explained in very nice way what small steps we can take. One thing I wanted to ask you, especially because you have spent so much time abroad also in and especially in US, that is there any possibility of having some allies outside India as well, who might not be typically allies, but something like maybe friends with benefits kind of a thing? Can we ever expect, because on the other side, you can see that even a white supremacist and an Islamist are almost like a strategic allies against Hindutva or against Hinduism. So if they can ally, all when they have nothing in common and they are at loggerheads with each other, can we also hope, or are there some groups or people or entities you think that can be our strategic ally abroad? I'm talking about abroad, not within India.
Perfect question. In fact, if you see on my YouTube channel, rajivmalhotra.official, the most recent video last week, Peter Boghossian, he's a professor. He left because he had a big fight with the ultra left in the American Academy. So
Mhm.
we connected, and I'm explaining to him how the ultra left is damaging India, the breaking India, and I'm explaining to him that there is also a breaking America going on. There is a breaking
Mm,
America going
mm,
on by the same people, and you should watch that video. It's about an hour long. You should watch that video, and then he's communicating with me afterwards to try and connect me with all of his people. So that's the kind of alliances we are building. I'm building that kind of alliance where I'm finding that there are a lot of Americans who are also sick and tired of the same thing. You
right.
see, what happened is this breaking India was incubated and exported to India through various Indology and these kind of studies and Siddhanta and theories and all that. And now what has happened is that some of these breaking India type of ideologies are also working in breaking America. They are realizing that. And France is realizing what's happened to their society as a result of left-wing studies. Russia is very concerned about it.
Right.
Britain is very concerned about it. So, some of the leaders in these major countries are realizing that this ultra left movement all over the world is a big nuisance to them. And so we have to find allies like that. And I'm developing such allies. In fact, in my next book, I'm going to write about it. My next book is exactly this sort of thing on who are the strategic allies, because I've created friendships for intellectual purposes. I'm educating them that India is actually a good case study on what is going to happen in America also. And
True.
they're realizing that, my God, this can happen in USA, because we are facing this similar, what started as a Black Lives Matter became kind of woke movement, wokeism. Now it is critical race theory. Now, if you look at where the extreme left of the Democratic Party want, there is a nice Democratic Party centrist also. But what the extreme left want is sort of like our Maoists, our ultra leftist. So the Americans are also realizing, and therefore there is opportunity for us to find such Americans, sit down and educate them about all of these things. The talk I just gave today for SMART, I have discussed this kind of talk privately with a lot of American groups who understand and resonate with us and want to work with us. One such group are, for example, the Jewish community, because the Jewish community also feel that on American campuses, they're facing the same thing. Yesterday, I had a conference call, and November 1st, we are going to launch a webinar where two of us Hindus and two of the Jews are going to talk about what's happening on American campuses and compare notes on the experience of the Jews who are being attacked and the Hindus who are being attacked. So you're absolutely right. We have to find such allies and learn to collaborate with them, even if there are areas we disagree, but there are areas which are common, and we must learn how to be strategic and not just say that everything about this fellow is bad. We have to say what is useful where we can have a common ground, and that's exactly what I'm going to do now.
Yeah, excellent. I'll obviously look forward to that, and that's something I have been wondering a lot. And obviously, I don't have much of an exposure to U.S. politics or foreign politics as you do. Back in India, I think taking a leaf from there, I think our approach could also be similar. I see that many people, for example, these days on our side are trying an alliance with Pasmanda Muslims, for example. Those who talk about casteism within Islam. I would like your views on that. Do you think in the grand narrative that's helpful? Because there are also few people who think that that's not our problem. I mean, why are we bothered about reforming something within Islam? Why are we bothered about talking about a Pasmanda Muslim? But do you think that in domestic circles, those kind of alliance also we should not be ignoring?
Absolutely. See, I use the term Swadeshi Muslim in order to attract such Muslims. And I've started talking to some people privately. They're very, very much along the lines what you're talking about. Some of them are coming out slowly, but they're still scared. But it will happen. Eventually, these guys will come out more and more openly if we encourage them, give them some resources, help them out. Now, you see the Islam, one of the things I talk about a lot when I'm asked about the caste system, I talk about the Islamic caste system. You have the Ashraf, the Ajlaf, and the Azlaf. The Ashraf are the foreign guys who came. They're supposed to be upper caste. And even among the Ashraf, there is further stratification. The Saids are the direct descendants of the Prophet. The Sheikhs are the purebred, royalties of high class people of Arabia. And then the Turks and Pashtuns. These are the four subcategories of Ashraf, and they are the upper caste. And so the Ashraf are the ones, the Indians who got converted. They are the brown skin, while those other guys are fairer, complex, and all that. And they are supposed to be superior because they are the invading armies. So this caste system, the Islamic caste system, is a very living example of how caste system is shaped by foreign invasions. Because the Islamic community's caste system is shaped by foreign invasions, and the Urduization of Indian Muslims is something recent being done in order to Ashrafize yourself. So if you're from Kerala and you start, instead of speaking your native language like Muslims did all along, now you start learning Urdu, or you are Bengali, and the whole Bangladesh was created because they did not want Urdu to be imposed on them. They did not want the West Pakistanis to dominate their culture. They were very proud of being Bengali. But now there is an Urduization of Bangladesh also going on. So this Urduization is actually Ashrafization. It is a way to go up the caste ladder, because one of the markers of high caste is how they speak, what kind of demeanor they have, what kind of symbolism they have. So I think this study of the Islamic caste system as an example is a very good, very important thing for us to study and be able to go to any international forum where they're talking about caste system and talk back that, yes, we have abuse of caste in Hindu society. We have abuse of caste in American society. We have abuse of caste in Islamic society. So it is not a Hindu problem per se. It's a problem of asymmetries and cultures. And some of the reasons are because of invasions. Some of the society gets dismantled. They lose a certain profession. And so they become the underclass. So you have to look at the dynamics, the historical dynamics of different jatis over time. And the experience of Muslims today is a very important case study. We should also encourage and collaborate with women in Islam. I find that
Mhm.
the women in Islam are so interested, some of the very learned, educated ones. You don't try to de-Islamize them. Just say that within Islam, you need to fight as women for equal rights and so on. Women need help. I think that's 50% of their population. If the women, more and more women get educated and start standing up and demasculinizing this Islamic society, which is very hyper masculine, that is their problem. Too much male, these hormones, too much of this the testosterone kind of weaponized for jihad. If you can use the Islam's own women, educated ones especially, to and empower them, you can then break up the this whole power of Islamic terror from within. We need to collaborate with such people. I also collaborate with some Christians using certain metaphysics that they've appropriated certain metaphysics from Hinduism. They've got this
Mhm.
idea of non-dual Christianity. There is a whole movement called Christian Vedanta. They're movement like that. So I go and, on the one hand, I want to convince them where it came from, so they acknowledge it, and I am able to do that. Then I tell them that this is a bridge. Now, if you got so much from us, maybe you can get even more, and maybe you got to start converting us. Stop converting us and start learning from us, because you are already learning. So I'm also writing on this whole several volumes. I'm writing on how to negotiate, develop tactical alliances with people who are overall opponent to us, but they have a certain
Right,
subset within them, which is
right,
for us. And we have
right.
to pick out that subset of people, whether it is Muslims, whether it is some leftist people also, whether it is Christians, and be able to collaborate and build a coalition that will help us out.
Right. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, I would not be too off the mark if I were to say that Rajiv Malhotra ji uses, the vocabulary of our enemy or their framework, somewhat similar looking framework, and flips to themselves, whether it's about post-colonialism, then you talk about decolonizing your mind. If they are talking about caste, then you would say, okay, the caste is there, but it's also there in these communities, and it's because of the foreign invasions. So if I'm right in a way finding that pattern, then can you also suggest something about what you talked earlier about this liberal arts thing? Because we really, I don't think we can completely start speaking against liberal arts, because it's not something very easily digestible by a common person. And that why should I not study literature? Why should I not study music? And if they are being taught in IT and IIMs, then what's wrong? So how to convince them? Using the same kind of pro-liberal arts vocabulary, but not fall in trap of atrocity literature or subaltern literature, as you have said. Is there a way out over there, that we
Yes.
use the same vocabulary, but we don't allow that?
Yes, I think you're very perceptive. One of the methodologies I use, which is Purva Paksha of the other side, I really honestly try to put myself in their shoes and understand
Right.
why they are doing, where is their framework, what is the root cause of their thinking. And then I find ways that I can actually, this is hypocrisy because there's a double standard. If I turn
True.
it around and look at them in their own lens, they don't have an answer because nobody
True.
spoke to them like that.
Yeah.
Nobody took them on, said, okay, I accept this theory, now let's apply it to you. And they are not
Right.
used to, because first of all, you have to be very well informed, very well educated about all their work, and then you can play this game. And I love to play this game. So that is absolutely a correct observation. Now, in terms of applying this to liberal arts, absolutely, this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm looking at the history of liberal arts, the history of what is the roots from which we get the fruits. If there is, the root system itself has been distorted on how you do Siddhanta, what you study and all that. And once we understand the roots that have been distorted, from which all these fruits are coming, all these accusations, allegations, and hatred towards us is coming because of some basic theories that they have. Then once you understand all that, which is what I'm going to explain in my next book, then we can also show, if you don't distort if you do not make this distortion in your theoretical lens, then things can be looking very differently. So we have a Nalanda liberal arts. Nalanda was one of the earliest universities teaching what would be the Bharatiya liberal arts. You know, we had the 64 Kalas. We had the 64 Kalas where they were teaching all kind of arts, sciences, mathematics, all of that, and how it all works together. So liberal arts that should be done in the NEP should be our liberal arts, not bringing American professors to or Indians who've been trained there. So I'm not against liberal arts. I'm against the Americanization of liberal arts. That is a very serious matter to me. I think this Kriya University, KREA University in the South is heading towards becoming Ashoka-like. Ashoka University in near Delhi is a terrible center for this new liberal arts. And our very wealthy people have funded all this because it's very fashionable. No one has gone and really educated them. And when you try to educate them, they get very defensive because it's become very prestigious to stick together with all like-minded rich people giving millions of dollars, and they're on this board, and it looks very global. That you can go to USA and be seen as a white man, almost like an honorary white person, because you are promoting this kind of thinking, liberal thinking. So liberal thinking is sort of become a prestige thing for people who got a lot of money. Now the next thing is to sit at the table with white people and be on the same board and have this photo op, and you send it back, and all the Indians will say, wow, our beta also became like one of those Gorawalas. So it is this inferiority complex. It is a deep inferiority complex, not understanding that our own tradition has deep roots on how to study society. Liberal arts is about studying society, right? Studying society, studying different institutions. This is what liberal arts is. And we do not have to apologize. We do not have to borrow all this from other people. We just have to do our own liberal arts in our own way, So this is very important point that you've raised, the Indianization of liberal arts.
True. That's
the decolonization of liberal arts.
True. Hopefully, in that direction, steps would be taken. There is so